So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today. So my name is Julia Sermon. I am a graduate solution consultant. I am training currently to work in Brain's team. So yeah, this is my first presentation ever.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Julia. Okay, so just to start off the discussion. So my interest in this area really started back in around 1990 in the mainframe space. I was working at a UK bank, and I remember back in 1990 first seeing developers using a PC-based workbench for developing their mainframe applications in DB2, DB2 and IMS environment. In fact, I remember one of my first team leaders and mentors, his name was Colin. He said, this modern stuff will never catch on. But I think once he saw the possibilities, I think he changed his mind eventually, even though I still think his favorite programming language is assembler. But anyway, 30 years on, and today for still, it's still the case that for large enterprises, the mainframe is still at the heart of the engine room, and that would be required to underpin most large digital transformation initiatives. So today we're going to I'm sorry, I muted the wrong thing. Yeah, so today we're going to be covering four major topics, which hopefully will give you some ideas about how tooling and investment in developers can help to boost legacy skills and knowledge, to help you remove some of that old unwanted technology that might be sitting there in your software stack, and looking at how modernization of IDEs, the development environments, how that can actually help things and help progress some of the directives that you have within your organizations, and then looking at testing capabilities. Improving testing capabilities could be a very useful area to consider, and there's a couple of different approaches we can bring for that purpose. Can everyone still hear me okay? I think my Zoom meeting's disappeared.
Oh, okay, Brian, you're audible. You've just disappeared from video. So
okay, you can still hear me. Good. You see the slides, yeah? Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so over the years, I've been working on a lot of projects for customers and organizations, and the three main areas around application modernization, process modernization, and infrastructure modernization. And all of these areas, it's not just about investing in tools and technologies, it's about investing in people and bringing people along on the journey. And what we're finding is if we do that, then we can bring the old and the new together. So you can see the quotation here from IDC, which is that modernizing investments in core mainframe and other existing systems for digital transformation and innovation is vital across these areas. And we agree with that, and that actually tallies up with a lot of the work we're doing. And our friends at BMC released some figures in one of their recent surveys, and this also helps indicate that actually, mainframe is here to stay. A lot of executives are saying the mainframe is a platform for growth. Also, we're seeing that cloud technologies is a priority, and certainly a lot of our discussions now are around cloud technologies. And the hybrid cloud market is growing and should improve, should increase by 17% by 2023. So one of the challenges for the enterprise, I think everybody who's working on mainframe systems has been trying to unpick this for a number of years. How do you modernize the monolith? Many of the organizations we work with still have very large mainframe systems written many years ago. They've been added to, they've been massaged, they've been changed over the years and bolted onto. And this is quite hard to really get started on. Really what we say and what we see is that you can't start that program of work to modernize and break things up until you know where you're starting from. So it's really about understanding what you've got and then acting. And there are ways we can do that by investing in technologies to help the people get started with that job. So one of the things that we start with in virtually every single engagement we have with our customers, and we do this to help along the way, is to employ advanced analysis tools. There are many tools out there that let you understand what you're starting with, using analysis tools to take a more scientific approach around understanding what your start point is. And using tools like analysis tools, there are many of them out there, and some of them have different areas of expertise and areas of specialism. But what we see is that they can be used for a number of different things. And if you invest in the people, provide them with the tooling to help them unravel the applications, then you can unravel the complexity of the applications. And sometimes, we see that those applications predate the current development teams that are working on them. And when they're tasked with digital transformation programs, to understand what's there is quite hard, because just the sheer size and scale of these systems is you can't put it all on one piece of paper. So that can be a useful part to really get the best out of the tools and get the best out of the people. Handling the impact of change, these tools that are available help you understand the impact of change. And so if you can understand the impact of change, then you can reduce the risk. And especially, when there's sometimes very large scale changes, which don't just have an impact on, the application that's being changed, but have a knock-on impact to other applications across the enterprise. And, we'll touch upon this a bit later on, but also, overcoming the lack of expertise. And we've seen a few examples lately where customers have taken on board the insourcing, if you like, of applications that were previously outsourced. And over the years, the knowledge of the applications has been diluted because people have moved on, and the management of the application has gone to overseas teams, offshore teams. And when brought back in, the people that originally knew the application have since retired. And so tools that can be used to understand the tools, to help to understand the application, to produce diagrams, charts, and pictorial representations of how applications hang together, can really speed up that learning curve, really reduce the amount of time it takes to get new people on board with managing, maintaining, and modernizing those existing applications. And I'll give you an example later on about determining what to modernize. We're working with some customers now who really don't know what to do, where to start. Hundreds of applications, what to do on each one. So that's something that can be schematically mapped out if you use the right approach, and if the people involved have got the right tools to do that. So here's an example of some of the, some diagrams that you can produce. There are several tools on the market available to do this. But some of the things we see them being used for, which we commonly see in our customer base, is understanding code and doing automated impact analysis and simplification. So any modernization program or transformation program, if you can simplify what you're starting with, then it's a much easier job to do. Onboarding and hiring and knowledge transfer, of course, that's easier if you've got the right tools, as we just described. Interrogation of application composition. Now this can be very useful if you're looking at perhaps breaking up an application. You want to start to build new services from something that exists already. You need to understand the composition of what you're breaking up before you start. Business rule mapping. We've got some customers who are looking at perhaps rewriting or radically changing some of the aspects of the applications, and using a tool which can go and find and manage and categorize and organize those business rules gives you a very good start point for some of those types of initiatives. And other things, metrics, function point analysis, complexity metrics, those things which can be used as a measure to see that if you're going to transform an application and start to move into something more modern, are you increasing the complexity dramatically, or are you simplifying things? It's always good to keep an eye on that, because if you don't, you'll end up transforming but ending up with a worse scenario in which to maintain and test an application if it becomes untestable and unmaintainable. So metrics can be very important to keep an eye on those kind of factors. So some examples of customers that have done this, and there's just a few quotes here on the screen, but one of these is a customer that simplified their application before they modernized it. That's the first one. And the next one was around gaining knowledge to be able to understand and deal with an application that nobody touched for quite some time, and that would have been a game changer if they were unable to do that. And the third one there is around using tooling that helps with QA, helps with the quality of the code, ensuring coding standards were adhered to, and the QA process flowed from that. One I'm working on right now is a UK bank who have over 100 applications on their mainframe. I think I mentioned this just now. They know that some of those applications are good for renewing. They want to invest in them, they want to get more value from them, so they want to enhance them and use them in different ways. Other applications that they decided they want to retire them off because they're being replaced by packages or other mechanisms. And others may just, they may end up just having to, replace them, rewrite them, or some other strategy. So before they can even start on that journey, the first thing they're doing is mapping out for each of those applications what the interconnections are between them, what the complexities are, what the technology stacks are, because some of them use different languages, different third-party software. It's a real mishmash of different types of technology. Once they categorize everything, once they scan everything using analysis tools, then they can put a certain number of criteria on each of those and decide what the best treatment is based on what it takes to maintain them today, what it costs to maintain them, and what the value to the business is. And they couldn't do that without some kind of methodical technology-based assessment work that's going on right now with some of the tooling that we have. So the next area I'm going to touch upon is removing unwanted technology. Now, this can be a bit of a emotive subject. For one person, some technology is valuable, another person it's not wanted. So how do we categorize that? Well, we're led by what our customers tell us, and there's a certain number of different technologies that we come across regularly, which the consensus seems to be that they would like, customers, organizations would like to eliminate them. And I'll come on to what some of those are, but some of the older technology, let's say non-mainstream technology, they have a certain number of issues surrounding them. So one is costs. So the user base of some of the technologies we see, especially on the IBM mainframe, some of the older technologies have been around since the 60s, 70s, 80s. The user base, the knowledge base, the skills available are dwindling. And as that happens, then sometimes costs of those pieces of software can go up. The technology doesn't get any cheaper as it gets older sometimes. So that could be a decision maker for removing some of that technology. I'm also seeing that some of the technology that people have got embedded in those applications is actually making it hard to become flexible in the future, to be able to do different things with the architecture and the platform, how to upgrade, how to maybe take advantage of new technologies that are coming along, especially with cloud and containers and other things that people want to embrace within the architecture. And these technologies are holding them back. Supportability of these applications with a lot of this technology embedded is harder because you have to do more testing, you have more impact when it comes to doing upgrades. So commonplace we see mainframe upgrades, whether it's hardware or ZOS upgrades, the amount of testing that's needed, and then to embrace the testing and incorporation of some of this other technology, it makes things more complex and adds a certain amount of risk to that process. And skill shortages as well. A lot of the things like code generators and special databases that were used back in the day, they're still running today. They're still, providing that same value to the business that it did back then, but the number of skills available to support them are dwindling. So in a lot of the projects that we've done at Micro Focus, we've ended up seeing a rationalization of some of this technology. And whether it's upgrading an application or modernizing an application, or whether it's modernizing the development process and implementing a DevOps style way of working, or whether it's looking at architecture and infrastructure aspects, they're the three main prongs or tiers to what we do. And in each case, the benefits of of eliminating and replacing some of this technology are clear to see when we get started on those projects. So, we're able to reduce the costs, give more flexibility in the deployment of those applications, allowing people to do different things with them, refactoring and creation of services and so on. And then leaving a whole more vanilla stack of technology that's easier to manage and upgrade, and then a move to standard skill sets. So if you've got something which is just say COBOL, DB2, VSAM, it's a lot easier than something that embraces a whole set of different languages and databases that are hard to get the skills for. And when we do this, we always make sure that we retain the existing functionality. So in the projects that we've done, that's the fundamental thing, that we're saying that we can eliminate the technologies, and we have techniques, technologies ourselves to be able to do this, to give the developers then a cleaner worksheet, something that's simpler to work with, something that's more speedy to work with, that actually performs the same function to the business. And that's really, really important. So a couple of examples of where we've done this. There are many examples, but I just want to pick out a couple of well-known names. One is retailer. They had a code generator on their mainframe, which was stopping them from reusing that same core application on other platforms. They wanted to take their core application and put it into different territories using an IBM Unix solution, rather than buying a mainframe for each country they wanted to operate in. By removing the code generator and the associated proprietary runtime environments, we were able to move to standard COBOL to have a single source that could then deploy on Z and the other platforms they needed. So that was a really successful example of how eliminating that technology provided those business benefits to get them to operate in those new models very quickly. Another example is the DWP, a more recent one, where they had a legacy system running on a mainframe, and by removing a non-relational database from the picture, they were able to move over to Red Hat environment with the same application, with the same logic, the same functionality as existed previously, but giving them more flexibility on where they can deploy that. So that's another example. Other examples are legacy databases. We've got a bank right now who's doing some modernization work with us, and they've had a whole layer of assembler middleware which was holding them back, and that's being converted now between us and the customer themselves, the bank. They're converting that middleware into COBOL. It used to be that assembler could do things that COBOL couldn't do. That's not the case anymore. In most cases, we can convert that assembler to something more readable, more maintainable, and more flexible. Okay, now I'm going to hand over to Julia, who's just going to talk to us about some of her experiences and around the development environments, the IDEs that we see customers adopting, which is another example of how investment in programmers, investment in developers is a really essential piece of the puzzle here. So over to you, Julia.
Thank you, Brian. So I'm going to pick up the conversation talking about how investing in developers and teams can also include modernizing the tools that are available to them. We at Micro Focus believe that modernizing the IDEs your team use to write their code is a critical step to increase their efficiency and productivity, simply because older or outdated development tooling and older infrastructure could be holding them back and slowing them down. With newer tools, the capacity of development, as well as other processes included in the software lifecycle, such as testing, are going to increase. At the same time, reducing developer downtime and increasing the team morale as well. Micro Focus, as well as other vendors, offer fully integrated development tools that fit into any tool chain and will avoid the creation of siloed departments within the organizations to be able to enable a more DevOps-oriented environment. And one other point that is quite important when modernizing the tools for use for development is the one around overcoming skills shortages as well, because with more modern tools, it's going to be a lot easier to transfer what we tend to call legacy skills that Brian mentioned before, as well as onboarding new talents, which might be people that are the same age as me and only just starting their own career. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in just a few slides. And so this slide shows, these pictures show what modern industry standard IDEs look like. Specifically, these are Eclipse and Visual Studio, both with the Microfocus COBOL compiler, which is completely compatible with mainframe subsystems. And all the related programming languages that are listed here in the slide. So tools like these are really user-friendly and really do help increase the productivity of your teams by thanks to a wide array of functionalities, and starting from the standard with background parsing, a very simple user interface, and autofill, going on till more advanced functionalities, such as many different debugging options and refactoring tools as well. And I would like to talk about some of my personal favorite functionalities, as I've started my training using these tools to learn what a developer would see when working on a COBOL application on a mainframe. So these two pictures show these functionalities that are I'm going to be talking about. So this one here in the front is one of the our proprietary ones. It's called code coverage, and it's a type of debugging that recognizes the percentage of code per program and per paragraph that is executed at runtime, which means that it's easier to start the application analysis earlier in the development process, even before starting the testing processes, so that dead code or unreferenced code can be recognized and remediated before the application even goes into testing. The second picture, the one in the background with that graph, that is another one of the debugging options, and it's an automatically created program flow graph. And that is especially important and powerful of a tool when during the investigation process, even before starting the development, for example, that can help conduct a more detailed change impact analysis on the code that is already present and needs to be, for example, modernized or changed in some ways. There are other functionalities listed on the slide, and the two that I've mentioned and all of the other ones really will help bring in the different teams that are working on the same modernization process together. And the main goal in this case is to help deliver better code, essentially. Now, to touch about what I was saying earlier, we'll simply starting to use new tools really make, for example, the onboarding of new mainframe developers really that easy. And the short answer is yes, because I'm basically here today to prove this. So in this slide, there is you can see my progress starting from 5 months ago when I've started considering applying for the role at Microfocus that I'm in today. I started off with zero IT experience or computer science background. In fact, I had just recently graduated from art school. I had never written a line of code, and I'd never heard of the word COBOL or mainframes. And today, I'm already able to write simple COBOL programs that interact with databases, SQL queries in both IDs that I've shown you before. And exactly as I'm doing today, I'm able to hold a conversation about mainframe technologies. And of course, most of the merit goes to Brian and the rest of the team and their expertise and all the help that they've given me in the past few months, as well as the really familiar but powerful tools that were made available to me, which really sped up the learning process for me. And last but not least, all the resources that are available online, which might be something that people tend to not think about, but they've really, really helped me. And I still just end up on either the Microfocus COBOL guide website or the IBM one, or the third one that I forgot to list in the slide is the Open Mainframe project as well. All three resources are incredibly helpful to find to help people learn how to code in COBOL, basically, and about other mainframe technologies too. So these are some of the customer examples regarding specifically what I've just talked about, so the new IDs. These three customers have decided to make the investment for new developer tools to assist with modernization in the three key areas that Brian talked about earlier, so application, processes, and infrastructure. The first one is an online retailer, Teleflora, and they needed to accelerate the application modernization specifically to support a fast-changing business model and moving towards a DevOps environment. And they were able to do it thanks to the new tools that were made available to their development team. The second customer is a software company called Syspro, and they needed to modernize their processes to help onboard new developers into the existing development teams that wrote COBOL and maintained COBOL, and help boost what I called before the legacy skills. And as you can see on the quotes there, they were able to reduce the onboarding time of new development interns from several months to just a few weeks. And that's something that really resonates with me because I've really seen it with my own eyes and done it with my own experience. The last customer there is the German pension fund. And they wanted to modernize their infrastructure instead in order to take advantage of microservice-oriented architecture. And they were able to do this with their existing COBOL application thanks to the new tools that were compatible now with newer architectural standards. So the next bit is going to be all about investments made to improve testing capabilities and productivity of the testing teams. I've mentioned testing before, and testing is an incredibly important process during the software development lifecycle. Tools that aim at tackling issues that may occur during the testing processes sold both by us and other vendors, allow for great toolchain integration, just like what I've said before, and they're able to connect with both with the mainframe and all the industry standard SCCM processes and tools. By offering on-demand usage, they can release capacity constraints and enable the best practices of continuous integration and continuous delivery. So again, limiting the departmentalization of the teams. the testing teams this way are going to be able to leverage on more test regions and more test data in order to achieve better quality code and faster testing. And another thing that is really prominent in all of the tools that are available on the market that help tackle issues with testing is automation, which minimizes human error and speeds up the overall process. So the challenges that we hear our customers are struggling with when we start to have a conversation with them around testing are usually part of somewhat of a downward spiral, which generally starts with the market pressure to deliver better code in less time. This requires additional mainframe infrastructure to carry out all the necessary tests, and the lack of this infrastructure could lead to capacity bottlenecks, which could slow down, in the best case scenario, just the testing process, but unfortunately in the worst case scenario could slow down other processes as well. If the capacity constraints are too much, they could end up holding back the testing until later in the software development lifecycle, which will make the remediation costs increase. And the production failures of the application after it's released more likely, which in today's market, unfortunately, is really not an option. This next slide shows a study that was carried out by the NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is a USA governmental institution. And it really shows that remediating errors too late in the development process and the testing process can increase the cost of the remediation itself really exponentially. And this graph, of course, shows an average because it was a study carried out with several companies, and it doesn't really take into consideration the criticality of the application that suffered the failure or the bug or the error in production, unfortunately, because we did hear more tragic figures from our own customers before. So the question might pop up of what does the ideal testing environment look like then? So the ideal testing environment, in our opinion, is one that can keep up with a speedy process while saving costs and lowering the risk of failures, which are the three key areas that I divided the capabilities in the slide. So this can be achieved with a tool that is able to increase the testing capacity, integrate with the rest of the tool chain, this way leveraging on automation, and this way increasing the team productivity. And in order for the testing to be carried out more efficiently and more quickly when it's needed. A critical step in making the process of testing more efficient is to shift testing left so that developers and testers can work together and maximize the efforts of both teams that they put into deploying higher quality applications in less time. This way, with maximizing the effort of the teams that work on the deployment, the end result of the application is going to be significantly less likely to fail in production, which leads to higher customer satisfaction and protecting the investments that were already put into the development. One word that we really want to stress when talking about improving testing capabilities and environments is on demand. What both Micro Focus and other vendors that offer similar capabilities suggest is to shift testing on a mainframe compatible environment, which can be both server-based or cloud-based or even hybrid. That allows the teams to scale the testing needs and the testing regions up or down as it's needed by the testing tools or scripts that are in use in that moment. And especially when we're talking about a cloud environment, it's really important to remember that I am supposing nearly all of the cloud services are used have an on-demand system. So you really only pay what you do use, which is quite important. At the same time, you're able to scale the regions up and down as it's needed. And this really does create a lower cost environment that can be leveraged according to the necessities and maximize the productivity out of the expense, so that the services that come out of this development are higher quality and ensure a return of investment as well. We have a few customer examples here too. So these are customers that have invested in bettering their testing facilities for their teams. And as you can see, for example, for the first example here, for the first customer, they were able to, at the time of being interviewed, they were expecting to cut testing costs by 40% thanks to heightened productivity. In the and in this second two cases, you can see how improving the testing environment helped increase the confidence in the quality of the production releases, include more functionality for each release, and even increase the number of releases per year, because the testing was now more efficient, faster, and even less expensive, so that these customers were able to really concentrate on what they were actually putting into the new releases instead of worrying about how to carry out the testing because there wasn't enough capacity for it. And this is the end of my bit, so I'm gonna pass it back to Brian for the summary and if there are any questions as well.
Thanks very much, Julia. Yeah, so just before we go into the questions and answers session, just want to summarize some of the things we've covered today. What we're trying to get across here is that your developers are your key enablers, and most of the organizations we're talking to are undergoing or are planning some kind of digital transformation in one form or another. So investing in developers, investing in those teams are, you know, they're the key enablers. They're the people that are going to make it happen for you. So you must invest in them. And the wide array of fantastic tooling that's out there on the market now, from analysis of code through to development consoles and IDEs, through to testing platforms and automation, as well as all the DevOps style connections that are available. All of that means that, you know, there's no reason not to invest in the developers. There's so much available, and if you choose the right technology, you can make a huge difference to what's happening in your businesses. So you know, encourage that investment, and you know that will enable you to, you know, make those applications deliver more to the business, which is what everybody wants from us these days, of course. The development process, the delivery process with DevOps and agile techniques, you know, that's going to change the way you work for the better, and start to put everybody on an even playing field, really, in terms of the tools used, the modernization of the approach, and so on. And with all of this, then the applications themselves can start to be opened up to new infrastructures. You know, we're seeing, you know, hybrid approaches, we're seeing cloud adoption, we're seeing containerization and other techniques which are proving already to be very useful for exploiting that key functionality that exists within, you know, the existing applications that have been sitting there for 20, 30, 40 years. They can be reused, exploited in new ways, as long as the investments in the people and the tooling is made in the right way. So hopefully some of that's been of interest, and if you do have any questions, we're happy to take them now on the chat window. I've put our email addresses up on the screen there, so if you've got any specific questions that you'd like to ask us afterwards, then please feel free to shoot an email to us. Be happy to answer anything that you might ask. But yeah, over to Q&A.
Thank you very much, Brian and Julia. That was really interesting. I think as a a lot of topics you covered that many customers that us at BMC and CompuWare are seeing. So it definitely resonated in terms of it's not just Micro Focus customers. So you already have a question. I'll leave you to read it and respond.
Okay, if I can find it. I've got plenty of windows on the screen. I'm just trying to find the questions window.
Okay. How does one decide between Micro Focus on PC, native mainframe, Zoe, IDZ, etc., when agreeing an IDE direction?
Okay. Well, I think yeah, it's a good question. How do you decide on the IDE direction? Well, there's plenty of choice out there. Naturally, being someone who's worked at Micro Focus for many years, and I've actually been a customer of Micro Focus, I would have a tendency to say this, but we've got probably the greatest experience in this area, and the greatest number of successful projects where we've enhanced and maintained and completely changed the way that developers have worked. So we've got a lot of experience. The IDEs, they may come and go. Up until recently, up until say 10 years ago, we had our own proprietary IDE because there was no industry standard agreed way of doing it. You had ISPF on the mainframe, but on the distributed platforms, there was no agreed way. Microsoft came along with Visual Studio in the end, and Eclipse came along from IBM, and that was open sourced. So we've looked at the market a few years back and decided that those two are probably here to stay. And I think we made the right choice by adopting Eclipse and Visual Studio. Now, if that changes, then we'll change our direction at Micro Focus. If a new IDE became the mainstay, then we would have to look at that seriously, because we want to be able to take those existing legacy systems and existing developers, we want to take them forward into whichever direction they might end up going. So that covers platforms, it covers technologies and architectures. So some of the latest things we've done with our COBOL technology is allowed deployment back to Z and deployment to alternative platforms. And those alternative platforms are spreading wider now in terms of Docker, in terms of cloud adoption. So I think when you're choosing an IDE, the IDE is a commonality, but it's the technology within the IDE that matters, depending on the direction you're taking things in. Are you going to be with a mainframe for 10, 15 years time and you want to sort of embed yourself into that framework, or do you want a bit more flexibility, but not forcing yourself to move away from it? So I think look at the options, talk to the various vendors, and decide which one gives you the most flexibility and is aligned with your own particular goals. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, if I can,
please, Julia.
I was gonna add that it really depends on the needs of who is trying to make the decision between what vendor they want to go with, because different customers are always going to have different needs, and we don't want to be in the position that we only recommend ourselves, because we are a good choice if the environment choice is right. So I'm supposing this is pretty much our view, that we're really want to go with what our own customers think is best for themselves. Like, we want to align ourselves to our customers.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? I can't see the chat window for some reason, but if someone can shout out what the questions are.
No, just a thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No. I did have one on email that I can read out. It says, how does new tooling help you break up the monolith? So this probably relates back to one of the slides that I showed earlier. So yeah, breaking up the monolith, the way we've seen customers approach it is, first of all, like I said, understanding what's there, using tooling to break it down to really understand the business functionality within the application and decide what application functions need to be broken up. And when we say broken up, it's normally because those features need to be consumed in different ways. So what we have, and I'm sure other vendors have as well, is some ability to refactor applications. So take a slice of functionality, and you want to make that self-sufficient and standalone and deployable onto new environments and architectures. So we can take the code, we can take the associated associations that require that, that are required to make that code run. So there could be things like the copybooks, the data, the other intertangled pieces of the puzzle that are required to make that stand alone. We can then refactor that code into a new program, a new service, a new API for deployment elsewhere. So refactoring is an approach of doing that, but it really starts with understanding what you've got before you decide on how you're going to break it down. And then once you then break down the monolith, you're doing it in the right way for the right business purpose if you've understood what you're starting with. I hope that answers that question. Any more on the chat or?
No, nothing else has popped up.
Nothing else. Okay, well, thanks very much, everyone, for listening. I'm now going to hand over back to Stuart, who's just going to make some closing comments and talk about the survey and feedback.
Just advance, that's it. Thank you very much. So this was session 2AU. Thank you very much again for, certainly I found it thought-provoking for the content of the material. So if people could provide feedback for 2AU, that would be really helpful for us at GSE and the presenters. So thanks everyone for their time, and enjoy the rest of GSE. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you.